Well, I don't think we should call them demons. He had a disease. He had alcoholism, and it's an illness. And I think we've got to get over this idea that it's some sort of, I don't like the language that sometimes we use about alcoholism. It's an illness. It's a disease. Some people get it, some people don't. The same as cancer or diabetes or asthma or anything else. And it's true that every time Charles or you or me or anybody else, every time we lift a glass, that's a choice that we make. But we don't make a choice to become alcoholic. That is an illness that hits some people and doesn't hit others. And you're right, that Charles was a wonderful, wonderful man. And what's been, really moving about this week is that, yes, of course, there's inevitably focus on his drinking, and quite right too, because that was part of him. And clearly, as you say, it's part of the cause of death. But the reality is, lots and lots of people have been remembering everything about Charles. I mean, I've just been at an event here at Glasgow University where he was once the rector, and I mean, you don't normally hear people saying that they love a politician, but the people did love people here at the university. They loved Charles Kennedy, and I think that it's just tragic that he's gone. Of course it is, but I think that this point about alcoholism is that actually it's probably the thing that gave him, if you like, that vulnerability that made people realise he was a very, very, very human politician.
For those that didn't get an opportunity to read your blog earlier on in the week, you were talking then about your experience of your friendship with him and how you managed to, or how he talked about when he was drinking or when he wasn't drinking, and the code that you have. Perhaps you could just, for people that didn't have an opportunity to read that blog, give us an insight into what you were saying.
Well, it was, the fact is that I think I probably, because I had my own difficulties with alcohol, I probably was one of the few people in the Westminster Village, if you like, that Charles did talk to about his drinking, and we talked about it a lot. And it was partly in jest because of the whole phone hacking thing, but we used to have this little code, which was health fine, health good, health okay, health not so good. And health not so good meant that he was feeling, either he was about to drink or he was drinking. And the thing is that Charles did go for quite long periods without drinking. But I don't think he ever really reached that point that I was fortunate enough to reach, actually not far from here in a hospital. You have to reach the point yourself where you say, do you know what, these people have been telling me I've got to stop. They're actually right, but they can't do it, only I can. And I don't think Charles ever quite got to that. And that is in the end the tragedy. And of course, somebody said in one of the interviews I just did a few moments ago, was politics and Westminster to blame? And the answer to that is no. Yes, it's an easy place to drink, but I think the whole of Britain is an easy place to drink. We've got a very, very dangerous drinking culture in Britain, and a lot of people fall victim to that.
How did he cope with, when he was drinking, he must have, as far as Donald was concerned, his young lad, he must have found that quite a challenge as well, and quite difficult to realise that he had this young boy and he had all those responsibilities, but he still, he had this disease that he couldn't conquer.
I mean, look, I saw Charles with Donald a fair bit, especially up here. We'd go on holiday up in his constituency and we'd see them a lot. And Charles and Donald, seeing them together was fantastic. He was a really, really loving dad, and Donald is a fantastic boy. And I thought that the family today, recognising that those tributes in the Commons that Donald was able to see, he probably won't remember. He probably couldn't have taken it in at the time, but he'll have that on tape and Hansard. It'll be there forever, of all these people who will become figures in history, prime ministers and the like, saying things about his dad that will be there forever. So of course, like any family member, you worry about other people. But this is the thing you have to understand about alcohol, is that I sometimes think that those who don't understand alcoholism, they sort of look at it, and I understand this because I sometimes do it myself. You see somebody who's so clearly gripped by this and has got a wife or a husband or children or parents or whatever, and you want to say, look, do you realise what you're doing to yourself and to other people? And of course they do realise it, but you can't stop it. And I've been in that position where you're inundated with people saying you're destroying your life, you're you're ruining your future, you're making everybody unhappy. And I've been there, and the more people say that to you, to be absolutely frank, often the worse it gets. And for me, I was incredibly lucky, because I hit rock bottom, and I realised it was rock bottom, and I realised unless I faced up to that, and I had a fantastic support, medical support particularly, and family support, particularly my partner Fiona. I had all that, and I was able to get through it. But a lot of people can't get through it. Now Charles actually has lived with this disease for a long, long time. He's done some amazing things even while he's had it. But those tributes the other day, they were very moving, they were very powerful, and as the cliche goes, it's the House of Commons at its best. But I think there's something else that MPs have to do. They have to face up to the fact that they have to take the lead in challenging and changing the culture of alcohol that we've got in our country, which I'm telling you, I think is worse than anywhere in the world. And unless we face up to that, there are going to be so many more people that nobody will be talking about on the television, that nobody will be holding memorial services for at buildings like this. They'll just be another victim of alcohol. And here in Scotland, I'm not an SNP person by any means, but the SNP government, to be fair to them, they've done a lot of good stuff on alcohol abuse, at some considerable showing some political courage in doing it. And the Westminster government, I'm afraid, did not. They could have gone for minimum unit pricing. It would have made a difference. They could have gone for putting in proper education about what alcohol does and the damage it's doing to people, but they didn't do that. And I think the whole thing, it's probably not the day to get on a soapbox, but we've just got to take stock of the culture that we're in. I remember talking to Charles about this. In this country, when you're trying not to drink, you always have to explain why you're not drinking. You never ever have to explain why you're drinking. Would you have a drink? Yes, take it. Would you have a drink? Do you have a glass of water? Oh, you're not drinking. Are you driving? Are you pregnant? Whatever it might be. And that's a cultural shift. And I look at sport. I watch sport on the television all the time. It's drowning in gambling and alcohol. And if we don't face up to it, then there are going to be a lot more people like Charles, and we've just got to, I think, face up to that and do something. And the politicians who paid the tributes in the Commons, they have got to take the lead.
And for those that are watching this afternoon, Alastair, and they can see how you have turned your life around with the help of Fiona and you say the medical team as well, as opposed to what happened to Charlie Kennedy, is it as simple as making a choice, even though it is a disease? What advice would you offer to people who are struggling with the bottle at the moment?
It's very difficult to give advice to people because we're all individuals and we'll all have our own struggles and all have to deal with them. But I've met a lot of people in my time who've had alcohol problems, and some have got through it and some haven't. But I do think that it's about coming to this point of understanding, a genuine point of understanding in yourself, that it's got to stop. And that sounds very, very simple, but getting to that point is really, really difficult. And to be honest, it's not helped by people just saying to you, pull yourself together, just don't do it, because that doesn't work. They have to be led to that point by themselves with the help of other people. And Charles had lots of people who tried to do that, and at various points, those people, family and friends and doctors, they were successful. But the most important thing you've got to do, I think this is the same for the country. I think both as individuals and the country, the only way to deal with the problem is to face up to the scale of the problem. Funnily enough, on the train up today, I was sitting there, and about 2 seats away, and you get an eye for these things, and I can spot people with drink problems. And there was a couple of people talking, and this guy, he was saying to his wife or his partner, I don't know what the relationship was, and she was giving him a bit of a hard time about his drinking, and he was saying, "What are you talking about? I didn't have a drink all day yesterday until 9 o'clock." And that's a classic sort of, we persuade ourselves that we're not really drinking at all. I did that for years. I'm not, I know how it works. And ultimately, I think we've got to get to a position where, as a culture, as a country, we don't live in a place where students have to feel they get drunk in their first week, otherwise there's something weird about them. Where people can go to football matches without thinking, well, you can only watch football in a pub. You know, you either go to the ground or you watch it in a pub and you drink. Where if you lose, you drown your sorrows. Where if you drink, you celebrate. We're drowning culturally in a sea of alcohol.
Thank you for joining us on